to Across the Ring. My name is William Mayhem Michaels.
This is the scientist, Carl Schupfer. And today we're here with Marty Snow. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on your show, guys.
Absolutely, Marty. And before we get started and jump into the show, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Hey guys, my name's Marty Snow. I am the bastard of El Paso, the prince of strong style. I am the youngest ever Delgado Promotions world champion. I am a former PWL Lone Star champion, held both titles at once. Current Delgado Promotions tag team champions with my partner Midas. But thankfully for that Freebird rule, any two members of the Inglorious Bastards can be champions. So that's pretty much who I am. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Heck yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. So, now we know kind of where you are, but let's take it back to the beginning. So, who first introduced you to wrestling?
So that's a little bit of a funny question because I don't have this whole big momentum story of seeing a wrestling match. It's actually a lot more simple. Me and my brother, we were watching TV at night, and usually my parents would tell us to go to sleep early. But back in the day, here in Juarez, we didn't have WWE live, so we would watch it an hour after it kind of aired. So it'd be always an hour or a couple minutes behind you guys. So one day, me and my brother were in the TV, and we didn't know what to watch. And suddenly, he was just changing channels. And in the TV screen, we saw the smallest guy we've ever seen in our lives. And I'm talking about Hornswoggle. And that's literally the reason why me and my brother started watching wrestling. It wasn't because of the moves. It wasn't because of the superstars. It's because me and my brother saw a small person, and we've never seen a small person before. And it just kind of captured our imagination of whoa, what is this? But I think that was the last segment of the show. I remember it very clearly. It was Raw. Shawn Michaels was in there, Triple H was in there, and Hornswoggle was in there, and they were celebrating. We didn't know what they were celebrating for, but we were like, hey, yo, this is cool. They have that small guy. Let's keep watching. Mm-hmm. So it just became a tradition for me and my brother to watch on Monday nights, see what's going on. And then I think after the Royal Rumble happened, a cousin of ours, funny enough, with the same name as me, a cousin of ours told us about hey, by the way, there's also this other show called SmackDown. And that's when I was like, what do you mean there's a SmackDown? There's only Raw. And he was like, no, there's two shows. And this one's called SmackDown, and they have different superstars. And that's when I was introduced to Edge. I was introduced to Jericho, to The Undertaker. And I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Why is there not more wrestling? But yeah, that's how I started watching wrestling, because of Hornswoggle. So if anything, I thank Hornswoggle for everything.
We actually get to have a similar sentiment. I've actually had a few, pretty awesome opportunities to work with him at his promotion up here in Wisconsin. He runs a promotion up here called ACW. Really great show, really great guys. We also were fortunate enough to see him be in a death match here in Milwaukee.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, which was pretty sweet. You can see the photos up on Instagram, and you can see the photos on his new shirts. It's cool to kind of be a part of something like that, So we here in Across the Ring also love him and are a big fan of him. So it's cool that we have that in common. And it's great that stuff like that is what spoke to you early on with wrestling. But from there, what made you then decide, okay, I don't want to be just a wrestling fan, I'm going to be a wrestler?
So it's funny because I think this most wrestlers, if not the majority of kids, as a little kid, you kind of tell your parents what you want to do. And after seeing Hornswoggle and kind of seeing WWE for a little bit, it just kind of got into my mind yeah, I want to wrestle. This is cool. I want to do that for a living. And the parent, kind of worrying for their child are oh yeah, it's just space, Miko. You'll grow old of it and you won't like it anymore. So I kind of figured oh yeah, my parents are right. Maybe this isn't for me. So we were oh well, what else do we want to do? And kind of just thinking about everything of what you could be. I know my brother was going into engineering, my sister was going into medicine at the time, And it just kind of like, when I would think of those jobs, I was like, they don't get me excited for the future. It's kind of like more of dreading it. But thinking like, oh, wrestling, I was like, oh man, I want to start now. I had that urge of like, this is something that I want to do. So I kept like telling my mom, I'm gonna do wrestling. I'm gonna do wrestling. And she kind of told me like, okay, fair enough. Like, you want to do that, that's fine, but get your college education first. Whatever you do, get a college education. That way, if wrestling doesn't work out, you have your plan B to save. And funny enough, for me, my plan B isn't really my plan B, because I kind of screwed myself over in college a lot, because I understand all the subjects with it. So I went to university and I studied psychology with a minor in creative writing. The reason I got that minor wasn't because I was like interested in creative writing. It was because when I was like enrolling into the university, they kind of told me like, hey, you need a minor. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, yeah, you need a minor. Like, you're required to have one. So I was like, fucking hell. And I didn't want anything difficult. So I was either between philosophy or creative writing. And again, thinking in wrestling ways, I was like, well, if I get creative writing, at least maybe I can make a character that's interesting enough for the people to enjoy if I ever wrestle, or make stories, or, you know, try to give my 2 cents of how a story should go. So that's why we chose creative writing. And the reason we chose psychology was because my teacher at the time in high school, he really got me into that psychology world. That was the only class that I actually kind of paid attention in high school. It was my psychology class. So I was like, well, if I have to sit down and listen to someone speak, I might as well just listen to psychology, because it was interesting to me at the time. So we were in university getting our degree. We got it a little bit faster than normal, because in my high school, they offered you a way to get like early college.
Yep, college credits.
Yeah, there you go. So when I graduated with my associates. So we just went straight to our actual like curriculum that's more of like your actual classes. So we graduated a little bit early. We just graduated last December. So that was interesting. That was hard. But anyways, back to the topic. When I was in my first semester of college, I was really thinking like, well, if I'm going to start wrestling, what wrestling school should I go to? And I didn't know where to look, you know, like I was like, well, where to now? You always hear like there's wrestling schools, but there's never like a lot about them as much back then, at least. And I was scrolling through Facebook one day and I saw Pro Wrestling Send tryouts. You get a scholarship to get into the school, whatnot. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I saw El Paso, Texas, and I was like, oh shit, that's where I live. That like this is a lot closer now. Like this is, I can do college and I can do wrestling now. And we didn't really tell my mom. I just kind of applied. And then the day I was like, hey mom, by the way, I have this thing, so do you mind taking me? And she was like, what do you mean? Like, you're doing this thing? I was like, yeah, I'm basically doing it. And she was like, oh, okay, well, good luck. So Pro Wrestling Sen is what eventually became Legacy, but back then they were going by Pro Wrestling Sen. We went out there and it was just like little kid me was like, oh crap, this is a ring, and this is actually happening, and I am stepping in a ring, and like, oh my goodness. And we always take that memory very close to the heart, because that's also where I met Jimo Kaminari in there.
Yeah.
Of course, he was the one that ended up winning the scholarship and whatnot. And I'm not gonna lie, that one kind of hit. You know, we were pretty confident, like leaving. We're like, all right, we were treated decently. And I even remember telling my brother, because he asked me, hey, how did it go? I was like, you know what? I feel like I did a lot better than most, but if anyone's going to get it, and if it's not me, it's probably going to be this kid. And sure enough, it was Jimo who got it. And I was like, bloody hell, bro. Why did you come? But we're really glad that he came. He's really good. Yeah. Such a young boy, but he's really, really good. And we just kind of like stopped looking back, you know. Even though we didn't get the scholarship, I knew that wrestling was something that I wanted to do. So with all the money that I saved up or money that I got for college, I kind of just used it on wrestling, and we just went with that, man. And once we got that graduation, that's when I kind of like realized like Legacy's been doing good. They've taught me as much as they can, but I wanted to also get trained by people at the level that actually made it to the big times.
Yeah.
So looking into those, we chose Flatbacks, who was run by Sean Spears and Tyler Breeze. And that was also amazing experience. Definitely learned so much. I'm kind of grateful for all the times of where I've trained, because I've always heard the stories of like it's very cutthroat. People don't really help you. It's like you either swim or you sink. And in both Legacy and Flatbacks, both my companions, they were very helpful. There was no real jealousy towards each other. It was very like, hey man, let me help you out. Like, this is what you're lacking. Even guys who graduated in Flatbacks that are wrestling right now in the independents, they would show up sometimes, and they were also a lot nicer than they should have been probably. Like they really didn't have to help me out in anything. They really didn't even have to talk to me, but they did. Cam Stewart is one of those guys. The tag team, Better Together, such great guys. Wish them the best. But we're really lucky just having the ability to be in places where everyone wants to elevate each other. And I think that's just how wrestling should be always, you know? But unfortunately, I know it's not all the time. But I've been fortunate enough to be in a place where everyone wants to see each other grow for the best.
And I totally agree with that. I've been to PWL locker room, and I've brought guys with me to your locker room, and the consensus is there's no other locker room like PWL. There's so much support, and there's so much great things going on in El Paso. It's insane. You guys really build each other, and you guys really elevate your show. I mean, it gets better every time you watch it, and I mean that. And it's funny that you brought up trying out for that scholarship with Gmo, because we just interviewed CJ Compost, and he said it was between you two. So it's funny because it was right there.
Yeah, it was right there, and they ended up giving it to someone else as well. And I'm not gonna lie, that irked me a lot, because I was like, how did he do it? Like, there's no reason why that person should have gotten it. There were 3 guys who got the scholarship: Gmo, another guy, and then a girl. And then the guy who got it and the girl left. So Gmo was the only one that actually like stayed. And I was like, bro, you should have just given it to me. Like,
right.
Yeah.
So what was your mom's initial response when you were like, I'm diving head deep into this, you know, I got the school thing out of the way.
oh,
Here I go.
she kind of hoped that I was kidding in a way, because as my last semester was approaching, I kind of sat her down and I was like, listen, I did what you wanted. I've done it in a lot quicker span as well. Like, theoretically, and I laid it out to her like this: theoretically, I have 2 other years that I should have been in college, right? So once I'm done, I am gonna go to Florida and I am going to train over there. And, you know, give me 2 years and I'll just do wrestling. If it works out, cool. If I see that there's something I'm missing, I'll continue to either go into my field or maybe get a master's if that's what makes you happy. But it took a lot of like talking to her, because she would always be like, well, how are you going to do it out there? And I'm a very, I plan out what I want to do, but sometimes I forget like the smallest details of planning. So there was like, I paid the school, I paid the place to stay, and I was like, all right, cool, I'm fine. But then I kind of like forgot that I also need money to eat, and how I'm gonna go to the school and back. So like my brain was like, I'll just walk. And we did walk a lot in Florida, but we didn't think that we were gonna walk as much as we did. Luckily, again, very fortunate that my classmates were like super nice. Mainly my boy Nathan Smith, man. Like, if it weren't for him, man, like, I think I would have quit a lot sooner. but he was very nice to me. He always drove me around if I needed it to be. So he made that trip a lot easier. And it helped a lot too that my brother always took care of me as well. If I needed anything or I was low on money, I know I could ask him like, hey man, like, is it cool if you help me out this week? And never questioned it, never said, yeah, but like, he was always like, yeah man, I got you. So we appreciate our brother, man. He's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. It seems like you had, a hell of a start. You had a lot of different people supporting you along the way. And despite the bumps with, maybe not getting the scholarship and stuff like that, it seems like you continue to find ways to drive and keep going. But when you aren't driving and pursuing and doing wrestling things, how are you spending your time?
So that's kind of like a funny question because wrestling, I don't know if it gets like this with other guys. Maybe I'm just too obsessed, but it's kind of hard to turn off that wrestling mind because I'll be doing like something not related to wrestling and I'll still find a way to be like, oh, this would be a great idea for a promo, or oh, this would be really great if like this story happened and then this happened and then like what I was supposed to do to distract myself from wrestling, I'm back into wrestling. So it's kind of like, oh man, what the hell? But when I am able to kind of like separate myself from wrestling, I like to play a lot of video games. I haven't had the chance to play it as much, but currently we are playing the new Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I get very impatient sometimes, especially like if they don't tell me exactly what they want me to do, I'll just explore and do like random stuff. And I'm like, wait, okay, back to the main objective. Like, what was I supposed to do? Today we had the chance to play a little bit of Jedi Survivor. That's a game that we bought at launch and then we didn't touch it for like a lot of months because I just didn't have the time to actually sit down and play it. But if I'm not playing video games, man, I like to read, man. Like, even if I didn't choose philosophy as my minor, like I still read a lot of philosophy books. Currently, right now, I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I hope I'm saying the name right. We finished a book called Man's Search for Meaning. That was also a really good book. Yeah, man, I really am just a geek, man. I'll play video games, I'll read books, I'll watch animes from time to time, I read mangas. I'm a very simple guy to keep entertained with. But yeah, somehow all the stuff that I'm talking about, they'll remind me of wrestling or they'll say a cool line that I'm like, ooh, this would be really cool if I said it in a promo. And then I would try to think of like, oh, how can I incorporate this? Or like in video games, I'll see like some of the designs. I'm like, oh, this would be like such cool gear. Like I would think like, oh, this, if I did like a little bit tweaks here and there, that would be cool. But that's mostly what we spend our time doing, man. We like to read a lot. We like to play video games. We like to watch our animes. So yeah, that's mostly what I do.
So I'm a big reader too. So much that my wife decided to get me a Nook for reading because it's just one of the things that I do. As far as philosophy goes, I read a book not too long ago called Beyond Good and Evil. I don't know if you've read it.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. It is. It's such a good book. But Carl and I are both gamers, very much so. We don't ever have time to really jump into gaming anymore because we decided to jump in this world of wrestling. And like you said, everything we do turns around to freaking wrestling. It doesn't matter. What would you say from the other things that you do, the outside stuff, right? What would you say really builds to the character that you have now? What are some of the things that you pulled from to create Marty Snow, the bastard child of El Paso?
I think the most things that kind of I pull from is kind of a little bit of everything. I'm not too sure if I pull more from something. Like when I made Marty, the way that I like tried to think of him was what would be his philosophy. And then that's how I started to like look at all these different philosophers and the way that they would see life, right? And I'd be like, oh, would Marty agree with this? Or would he disagree? Or what type of way would he be thinking at? So that's how I use philosophy in it. And the psychology as well. I would think, what would be Marty's psychology? Like, does he have any like things that aren't normal. Like, is he schizophrenic? Is he like, what does he have? Could he have a multi personality thing? But that was a bit like, I'm not talented, but like I would look at those things. And as far as video games, we would see like things that we enjoyed. I think the video game that helped Marty the most was Ghost of Tsushima. You follow this character,
Nice.
that guy. He's built around the samurais and how he shouldn't stray away from the way. But you see slow cracks of him seeing like the actual world and how cruel it can be, and how they don't honor the samurai way. So why should he? Like, they're hurting the people he loves. So why should he just stand there and be like, oh, I can't, my code doesn't allow it. So seeing him like bend that stuff, I see it like in wrestling as well. Like, the reason I didn't give myself a last name was because our favorite TV show, Game of Thrones, depending where you were born, the last name that you have is the area where you're at. So if you're in the north, your name's Snow. If you're in the south, your name's Sand. So my way of thinking of Marty was, no one's truly supportive of this. So why should I give my family any recognition? So I'm just Snow because I'm the bastard. You guys didn't pick me. Same thing with the scholarship. You guys didn't pick me either. Like, I'm not gonna give you guys the satisfaction of, oh, I came from here. Like, no, I'm the bastard. I have no home. I have no flag that I'm raising that I'm like, oh yes, this is me. So it was just like more of those little things that we just liked, and I was like, this would make sense for this character in particular. So I think, if anything, probably video games, specifically Ghost of Tsushima, and philosophy books helped mold Marty Snow.
And I want to take a second, like everything you guys just heard. Marty Snow is a young man, okay? I think of all the philosophy stuff that he just laid out on you, and the time and age it takes to learn the type of stuff that he's laying before you. And Marty, what are you, like 21? Like, you're young.
I'm 22, man. I'm
22. Okay, 22. That's my point. I mean, but it's been like that every time I've had a conversation with Marty Snow. I mean, the guy, no offense, I'm going to talk in third person. The guy is just so well beyond his years to be 22. He's business wise, he's even like stepped to me like, hey man, you probably shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that because this is why. And I'm like, man, I would have never thought of that. And it's just so off the top. But with that said, talking about great stuff, we're going to throw in Doobie. You got to drink it. Why? Because it's great. It's for gamers and it's for anybody that needs energy. It's all that energy without the crash. It's Doobie.
Yeah, and you can get 10% off using the code across the ring. Use it today. All right, we got the ad out of the way. We talked about a lot of cool shit, all your philosophy stuff and everything, kind of pulling into, okay, what is Marty, right? And so I think from here, we learned about your beginnings. We learned about how did you first train, and then you traveled to Florida and you did stuff there, and now you're back here in El Paso, but still traveling, right?
Yeah.
So where are some places, you've named places you've traveled already, but what are some places that as you continue to build yourself and you continue to try to, form a name for yourself, where are some destinations that are on your short list?
Oh, man. I kind of have like this weird mindset that I know where I want to go, but at times I'm like, maybe I shouldn't jinx it, maybe I shouldn't go and be like, oh, I'm for sure gonna do it, because then people will come back to this and be like, hey, you said you were gonna do it, so where's the proof? But our biggest like place to be at, man, it's Japan, man. I want to wrestle in the Tokyo Dome, man. I want to be in Osaka. I truthfully want to be in New Japan a lot. I've always wanted to do a G1. I've always wanted to do those tournaments, like just how they're laid and how exhausting they are. They kind of like make me want to be in them even more, just to truly be like, okay, like if I'm actually saying that I am as good as I am, like this shouldn't be a problem. And just creativity that you have to have, man, for having so many matches in such a short amount of time. It's just a goal that I want to do. I think if anyone has like a career that I kind of want to emulate, it'd be Will Ospreay, man. Like, he did Best of the Super Juniors, he did the New Japan Cup, he did the G1. I think that's like something that I would want to strive for, you know, because we know that even though we look big in times, we're still pretty small in comparison to the heavyweights. So, you know, I'd want to like work in the junior weight division and then work my way up into the heavyweights. But Japan's like the biggest like goal that I have. Obviously, there's a lot of places in the United States that I like to wrestle in more frequently. The all my road is going to lead to Japan someday, hopefully.
That would be pretty sweet. You know, Japan's a place I think a lot of people have talked about. You know, it's certainly a place where a lot of the greats have really cut their teeth and made a name for themselves, you know. So I think that would be really cool for you to etch your name in the list of guys that were able to achieve something like that. One thing that I think is kind of unique with that Japanese style is that oftentimes they like to pull in a lot of martial arts into it, right? They'll even do things like events with like MMA fighters and things like that. Do you have a bit of a martial arts background?
We do have a little bit of a martial arts background. I won't come here and claim that I was like the best and the hidden gem. I was pretty decent on it. I don't think I was the worst of it, but I also don't see myself as like a top level guy, because we had the opportunity to train with like actual top level guys, and you would be very humbled really quickly and learn that you're not really that good as you thought you were. But the biggest martial arts that I have the most experience with, it's Taekwondo. My parents put me in it when I was 5 years old. So I have a lot of experience, 17 years, if I did the math right. Yeah, 17 years. Boxing, we did a little bit of that as well. But the funny thing was that a lot of times I wasn't going to actual places that were teaching you. Kind of like a lot of my friends would go into those gyms and then they would come home and they would kind of teach me like, oh, this is the drill that we would have, or this is what they told me. So I would kind of like learn of that. And we were always really into like mixed martial arts, really into UFC and all that stuff. So I would see that and then I would hear like, oh, this is judo and this is jiu-jitsu and this is Muay Thai. So we have that interest. So we'll look into those specific martial arts. But yes, I want to clarify that what I do is Taekwondo. It's not karate, because everyone sees the black belt and they automatically assume it's karate, but it's in the name, guys. It's really in the name. Karate literally means the way of the empty hand. Like they're very different, and Taekwondo is the way of the foot and something. I forgot right now, which is the worst timing, but if you really want to know like the differences in karate and Taekwondo mostly focuses on the speed and the accuracy of your style, and karate is more of like power and it's more aggressive in a way. It's not to short play Taekwondo and say that they don't have power. Like they definitely do. But just in an overall scheme of things, Taekwondo dojos explain to you like the speed and the accuracy. They focus more on that, and karate will show you more the depth of emphasis and power. So there's similarities, yes, but there's difference, guys. I promise there is difference.
I've always felt that Taekwondo had more of a flow to it, as to where karate is more precise and then they stop, right? Because they'll stop, not when they're competing so much, but in the training and what they do, as to where Taekwondo is more of a flow of things that you're going through. One of the things I want to know is, with everything that you've taken in, where do you want your legacy to go? I know you mentioned Japan, but how do you want your legacy to end?
So in the most simplest of terms that I've always put it, and I've always said it, as arrogant or as cocky as it sounds, I want Eddie Guerrero's career, but bigger and better. I think as a guy from El Paso, Eddie Guerrero's like still the biggest wrestler you can look up to, and in El Paso, you know. But I think it kind of also pisses me off to think about it because Eddie's been gone for quite a while, and you're telling me that no one from El Paso has tried to step up and be like, all right, I'm gonna be even better than Eddie. Like, the talent that there's in El Paso, for no one to have that like hunger to be like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna show that El Paso has more than one Eddie Guerrero, and that's gonna be better and bigger than what Eddie is, respectfully. I definitely think that I can do that for El Paso. I don't have a dynasty like the Guerreros. I have nothing to my name, but I truly believe that when everything's said and done, when someone says, hey, you know what, you know who's the greatest wrestler to come out of El Paso, one person will be like, oh yeah, it's Eddie Guerrero, and that person's gonna be like, oh well, yeah, he's good, but Marty Snow was levels beyond him. So that's what we want to do. That's what we want to strive for. We want to be in that same conversation as Eddie Guerrero, because you know, for all he did for the people in El Paso, I think he's not as appreciated as he should be. We do have that mural, but man, like, to him being considered one of the greatest of all times, like, that man should have like a statue in El Paso. I don't know why we don't have that, but
I can agree with that.
we want to be in that same breath of like, you know what? I don't know who's the best to come out of El Paso, Eddie Guerrero or Marty Snow. That's what we strive for.
That's pretty sweet. It's cool that you set two bars there. The first bar was you saying you want to be as good or better than Eddie. Then you're like, but also the bar that's currently set for Eddie isn't even high enough. So the standard you're setting for yourself is incredibly high, and that's incredibly impressive. I think that's awesome. But some fans, they're hard to please. Like, you could do every cool move, you could say every cool thing, and they'll be like, give me more, right? So, for the listeners that are here, listening to your story, hearing all these cool things about you, and still being like, I don't know, I need a little more. What's the pitch to some of these hold-up fans as to why they should come see you, Russ?
Listen, to all those hold-up fans, I see wrestling like music. There is a lot of variety in wrestling that if you tell me you don't like wrestling, I just don't think that you've watched wrestling. So I would say that if you do come see me. And if you don't like me, chances are there will be someone in our roster that you will like. And I'm okay with that because it just gives me more time to make you like me or make you understand why I am better than your favorite wrestler. So even though I'm not the reason you'll stay, there won't be a show where you come out of it and you don't say, you know what, who I hated this show? Marty Snow. Like, this guy, there will be a reason why after each show that I'm at, there's going to be a reason for you to talk about me. Whether you like it or not, there's going to be a reason to talk about me.
Oh yeah, there it is. Well, guys, we have so much more to talk about, but I have a feeling that Marty Snow is going to be back because there's so much stuff we didn't get to touch on. But before we get there, Marty, I want to take this time, man, and thank you once again for coming on our show.
Thank you for having the time for me, man. We appreciate the platform. We appreciate all these across the ring viewers to come over to Marty Snow. That's something we appreciate greatly.
Absolutely. And for anyone that's wondering where they can follow Marty Snow, if you jump on Instagram, his name is not Marty Snow. And from there, you can click on his link tree and you can hit his YouTube, his Twitter, his pro wrestling tees, so you can get all of his merch and everything there. And guys, remember, make sure you like and follow us as well. If you haven't listened to past episodes, go check them out and make sure you stay tuned for future ones. We're on all platforms. There's literally nothing that we're on now. And as always, guys, you never know who'll be across the ring.